He said no. Not once. Not twice. For times. Every instinct in his body warned him away. There wasn't a single muscle telling him this was a good idea. Nothing inside him said he should play himself in order or surrender control. Fear didn't whisper. It screamed. And yet fear had always been there. In 2007, Nicolas Cage was living a version of success so extreme it felt unreal. He outbid Leonardo DiCaprio for a Tyrannosaurus Rex skull. He owned 2 castles, a private island, luxury cars stacked like trophies, and even a $150,000 pet octopus. At his peak, his net worth was estimated at $150 million. To the outside world, he wasn't just successful. He was untouchable, a living symbol of Hollywood excess. Brilliant, eccentric, wildly rich. Then the unthinkable happened. Almost overnight, the money vanished. Properties were seized. Debts surfaced from every direction. What once felt limitless suddenly felt suffocating. His net worth collapsed from $150 million to almost nothing. And panic set in. To keep creditors away, Nicolas Cage pushed himself to the edge. He appeared in film after film, 29 direct-to-video movies in a row. Not for acclaim, not for love of the craft, but to survive. People laughed. Critics mocked him. They called it desperation. They called it a fall from grace. What they didn't see was fear. They didn't see a man trying to outrun financial ruin. They didn't see sleepless nights or mounting pressure. They saw spectacle, not collapse. But the truth is, Nicolas Cage's downfall didn't begin with a dinosaur skull. It didn't begin with castles or islands or outrageous purchases. It began quietly, with trust. Cage handed over nearly every financial decision to a business manager he believed was protecting him. Someone he thought was watching the numbers, managing risk, securing the future. Instead, debts multiplied behind his back. Properties were financed recklessly. Taxes were ignored. The damage grew silently, until it was too late. I didn't know how bad it was, Cage would later admit. By the time I understood, everything was already burning. The homes he believed were safe investments became traps. Property values collapsed overnight. Maintenance costs exploded. Loans stacked on top of loans. Castles turned into liabilities. Mansions became anchors. He found himself juggling mortgages on places he barely had time to visit. Every asset that once symbolized security now pulled him deeper underwater. And as his finances crumbled, his reputation followed. Headlines mocked him. Reports painted him as reckless and irresponsible. Commentators laughed at his spending habits. No one talked about the panic. No one talked about the fear of losing everything. I felt like I was disappearing, Cage later confessed. Like I was losing pieces of my life faster than I could hold on to them. Before anyone asked about his childhood, before fame gave him a face and a name, Nicolas Cage had already lived through a private collapse that nearly erased him. And only after the world watched him fall did his story finally circle back to where it truly began. Not in Hollywood, not in wealth, not in fame, but in a childhood shaped by silence, instability, and survival. Nicolas Cage was born Nicholas Kim Coppola on January 7, 1964, in Long Beach, California. From the outside, his life looked pre-written. A powerful name, a creative dynasty, Hollywood royalty running through his blood. His father, August Floyd Coppola, was a respected professor of comparative literature, a disciplined intellectual, a man devoted to ideas, language, and structure. His mother, Joy Vogelsang, was a dancer and choreographer, artistic, expressive, emotionally intense. On his father's side, the lineage was legendary. His grandfather was composer Carmine Coppola, his grandmother, actress Italia Pennino, his uncle, Francis Ford Coppola, his aunt, Talia Shire, his cousins, Sofia Coppola, Roman Coppola, Jason Schwartzman. By name alone, Nicholas appeared born into certainty, privilege, creative safety, but inside the house, nothing was safe. His mother suffered from severe schizophrenia and deep depression. Her illness controlled the rhythm of the home. Some days she was present. Other days she vanished, emotionally first, then physically. When Nicholas was only 6 years old, hospitals entered his vocabulary. Institutionalization became routine. Doctors, locked wards, electroshock therapy. She would disappear without warning. No explanations. No goodbyes. Just absence. By the time Nicholas turned 12, his parents' marriage collapsed under the weight of her condition. His mother vanished for years at a time into psychiatric facilities. Each stay erased more of who she once was. There was no sense of permanence, no stability to lean on. She could be there one day and gone the next. As a child, Nicholas learned something crucial very early. Showing emotion didn't fix anything. Fear didn't bring comfort. Sadness didn't change outcomes. Crying didn't bring his mother back. So he stopped reacting. Instead, he watched. He later said he studied his mother's episodes the way someone studies a subject in school. He memorized patterns, tracked mood changes, listened for warning signs. Detachment wasn't a choice. It was survival. The silence after she was taken to the hospital wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, the kind of silence that stretches and presses against your chest. His father tried to rebuild a life around the emptiness her illness left behind. But for Nicholas, childhood didn't feel like childhood. It felt like vigilance. He watched every room he entered, listened closely to every shift in tone, waited for something to go wrong. Years later, Cage described children of schizophrenic parents as superfrenetics. Hyper-alert, high-strung, constantly driven, always waiting for disaster. He recognized those traits in himself early. He moved too fast, pushed too hard, stayed restless. Staying still felt dangerous. If he stopped moving, something bad might happen. So he excelled, not for praise, not for attention, but because motion felt like protection. As he grew older, that emotional distance hardened into something sharper. He became observant, analytical, hyper-aware of human behavior. And slowly, that survival skill found a use. Acting. Cinema gave him structure, rules, order. In movies, chaos made sense. Every scene had a purpose. Every moment led somewhere. On screen, he could express emotions he never allowed himself to feel at home. Fear, anger, desperation, longing. Hollywood didn't feel like escape. It felt like translation. At 15, Nicholas landed a tiny role in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, one of Brad's nameless friends in a burger joint, a background character. But for him, it meant everything. He walked onto that set credited proudly as Nicolas Coppola, hope in his chest, believing his family name might finally open a door. Instead, it painted a target on his back. The moment people saw the name Coppola on the call sheet, assumptions followed. They believed he was handed the role, that his uncle, Francis Ford Coppola, had pulled strings. Crew members shouted lines from Apocalypse Now across the set, not out of admiration, but mockery. They repeated quotes, imitated scenes, watched his reaction. Nicholas tried to play along, but he was 15, surrounded by adults who saw him as a joke. Child labor laws cut his hours short, but the ridicule cut deeper. When most of his scenes were trimmed, it felt like confirmation, like the door he hoped for was already closing. One day, standing in front of a mirror, he realized something painful. The name Coppola didn't feel like a gift. It felt like an anchor. So he cut it loose. He renamed himself Nicolas Cage, inspired by Luke Cage, the lone comic book hero, and John Cage, the avant-garde composer who broke rules without apology. It was his first real act of rebellion, and it cost him. Producers whispered that he was arrogant, ungrateful. Francis Ford Coppola was hurt and withdrew support. Casting agents hesitated, unsure if hiring him would offend the family. Doors quietly closed. But Cage didn't bend. He straightened his posture, lowered his voice, and decided he would rebuild himself from nothing, even if it meant standing alone. By 17, Nicolas Cage felt trapped. School gave him no comfort, no direction, no promise that anything in his life would change. At home, chaos had already taught him that stability was temporary. At work, rejection had taught him that his name was a liability. He was tired of pretending he fit into a routine that never matched who he was becoming. What he wanted were movies. What he needed was a way out. So he dropped out of school. Not with a plan. Not with a safety net. Just with the belief that staying would crush him faster than leaving. Reality hit immediately. Most of his scenes in Fast Times at Ridgemont High were cut. The small spark of hope he carried onto that set disappeared. There was no follow-up role. No momentum. Just bills. He took a job at the Fairfax Cinema. Selling tickets. Scooping popcorn. Smiling at people who had no idea the kid behind the counter wanted to be on the screen they were watching. Between shifts, he stood in the dark theater, watched the glow of the screen, and asked himself the same question over and over. How do I get from here to there? There were no answers. Only hunger. He delivered pizzas at night. Memorized street names. Doorways. Faces. Each delivery felt like a reminder of how far away his dream still was. Then, in the most unglamorous way possible, his break arrived. He was called in, not to audition, but to read lines for other actors auditioning for Rumblefish, directed by his uncle. No favors were offered. No doors were opened. But someone noticed him, and he earned a small role on merit alone. It was tiny, but it mattered. His real breakthrough came with Valley Girl, a small film, a budget of roughly $350,000, shot in just 22 days. No expectations, no pressure. And then it exploded. The film earned more than $17 million. Suddenly, people were paying attention. Cage played Randy, a punk rocker in a modern Romeo and Juliet love story. And he gave everything. He shaved his chest hair into AV. He screamed until veins bulged in his neck. He moved like someone with nothing to lose. Not for money, for a chance. The director was paid just $5,000. Cage didn't walk away rich either. But he walked away with something more valuable. Momentum. After Valley Girl, Cage was determined to prove one thing. He belonged in Hollywood on his own terms. When he joined Rumblefish, even in a supporting role, he treated it like a final exam. He changed his look, his voice, his posture. Every movement was intentional. He wanted people to see effort, hunger, commitment. But disappointment followed again. When The Outsiders was casting, Cage desperately wanted the role of Dallas Winston. A tough, wounded rebel. A character built from pain. Cage felt he understood that pain better than anyone. To prepare, he locked himself in a room for 2 weeks, staring at a photo of Charles Bronson, studying posture, silence, stillness, trying to erase the sensitive teenager people mocked, trying to become unbreakable. But the role went to Matt Dillon, the industry's favorite. The rejection cut deeper than most people realize. This wasn't just a lost role. It was losing the approval he'd chased since childhood. And the pain ran so deep that Cage did something almost invisible. He showed up anyway. He slipped into the background of a fight scene. Uncredited. Unnamed. Just to be close to the film he wanted more than anything. The pattern continued. When The Godfather Part 3 was cast, Cage hoped again. The role went to Andy Garcia. Another wound that never fully healed. Being rejected by Hollywood was one thing. Being rejected by family was another. Then came The Cotton Club in 1984. The production was chaos. The budget exploded. Scripts were rewritten constantly, 5 drafts in 48 hours. But the real nightmare happened off-screen. Producer Roy Radin was murdered. Shot. Blown up with dynamite. The crime was ordered by a business partner terrified of losing money. The case became known as the Cotton Club murder trial. And Cage, only 20 years old, found himself surrounded by the darkest side of Hollywood. Violence. Fear. Greed. Rejection at home. Rejection in his career. And chaos everywhere else. Something inside him hardened. Cage stopped waiting for permission. He decided that if Hollywood wouldn't choose him, he would force himself to be undeniable. Cage's devotion to his craft became absolute. Every role was a test. Every scene demanded total surrender. Every choice pushed him to extremes even seasoned collaborators found alarming. His pain from childhood, from rejection, became fuel. Fuel he poured into every character. Every performance a reflection of survival, fear, and unspoken anger. In Birdie, 1984, he played a wounded Vietnam veteran, broken in body and mind. To feel that pain, Cage went to unimaginable lengths. He pulled 2 of his own baby teeth, without anesthetic. There was no medical need. Only conviction. Only belief that true agony would translate on screen. During filming, his character returned from war with his jaw wired shut and head bandaged. Cage wrapped his own head in bandages for 5 straight weeks. He slept with them, ate with them, walked the streets with vision narrowed, skin suffocated. The camera captured the truth he chased. Pain, isolation, confinement. The world finally saw something he had bled for. Birdie won the grand jury prize at Cannes. At that moment, Cage felt recognition, not just for talent, for endurance, for honesty in suffering. Then came Racing with the Moon, a World War II coming-of-age story. Cage's character, Nicky, was wild, volatile, charming, an unpredictable force. To summon raw emotion, he cut himself with a knife in one scene. The crew froze. He insisted they continue. Every warning, every caution only pushed him further. His determination was relentless. He felt the sting of critics claiming his name opened doors, not skill. Every slight became fuel. Every setback became intensity. By The Boy in Blue in 1986, Cage transformed his body entirely, gaining 30 pounds of muscle, training relentlessly, rowing like a 19th-century athlete. His hands blistered, muscles locked. Yet he refused to relent. Even when the films faltered commercially, his commitment was undeniable. Awards noticed. Nominations followed. Proof that audiences may look away, but the industry could not ignore him. The middle of the decade marked a dangerous turning point. His fearlessness collided with excess. His need to prove himself began consuming him. On Peggy Sue Got Married, Cage experimented creatively. He adopted a high nasal voice inspired by Pokey from Gumby, added large fake teeth, transformed the character entirely. The lead actress, Kathleen Turner, was horrified. Scenes became impossible. She begged Francis Ford Coppola to intervene. The crew murmured. Producers complained. Coppola, attempting to protect Cage's artistic freedom, allowed it. Chaos ensued. Scenes were red-hot. Tone became uneven. Resentment lingered. Trust strained. But Cage's ambition never wavered. He wanted boldness, originality, shock. Then came Vampire's Kiss, 1988. Cage played a delusional literary agent, spiraling into madness. To bring authenticity, he went further than ever before. He swallowed live cockroaches. On camera. 3 of them. The director did not intervene. He requested a second take. A test of limits. Cage's devotion knew no bounds. Years later, Cage admitted regret. It was cruel, unnecessary, beyond anything he'd wish on another living creature. At the time, he believed it was pure dedication. Total commitment to embodying chaos. To making madness real. From his first roles to these extremes, Cage's career had become inseparable from suffering. Every physical pain, every psychological edge, every humiliation endured, all became part of the craft he was willing to die for. His journey wasn't about comfort. It was about honesty, authenticity through endurance, sacrifice for the camera. Even as fame flirted with him, even as opportunity arrived in small, fragile forms, he never eased up. Every performance demanded the highest cost, his body, his mind, and sometimes his very sanity. By the late 1980s, Nicolas Cage had built a reputation unlike any other in Hollywood. Fearless, obsessive, unpredictable. And yet, the cost was catching up to him. His financial habits, once indulgent curiosities, turned into relentless burdens. 2 castles, a private island, exotic cars, expensive art, even a dinosaur skull. By the time the headlines hit, Cage's fortune had evaporated. $150 million gone. Debts stacked in every corner. Properties were overleveraged. Taxes ignored. Loans overdue. The man who had once dared everything on screen now faced a real-life crisis. No role could erase the mounting pressure. No fame could cover the panic behind closed doors. He pushed himself to survive. 29 straight direct-to-video films. Not for acclaim. Not for artistry. For survival. For breathing room. For keeping creditors at bay. Behind the public spectacle, there was a private reckoning. He faced humiliation, exhaustion, and fear daily. He felt the world laughing while he scrambled to hold the pieces of his life together. And still, there was reflection. The career that had begun from rebellion and survival now demanded recalibration. Cage began confronting the choices that led to his collapse. Trust placed wrongly. Excess indulged recklessly. Fear channeled into self-destruction. Through it all, Cage remained relentless. Every setback became fuel. Every loss a lesson. Even as Hollywood mocked his spending, even as debts mounted, Cage kept working. Roles weren't just jobs, they were lifelines. Every performance was a chance to prove himself, to reclaim autonomy, to survive creatively and financially. And slowly, the story began to shift. The man once defined by excess, obsession, and collapse was also defined by endurance, reinvention, and raw talent. The lessons of childhood, hypervigilance, observation, emotional detachment had become tools of survival. The pain of rejection and failure forged discipline. The extremes of acting, once dangerous, became signature commitment. By embracing both the chaos and the craft, Cage transformed his narrative. Not as a cautionary tale, but as a testament that even the deepest fall can lead to reinvention. That survival requires sacrifice, courage, and unwavering dedication. Nicolas Cage's story is one of extremes. Of genius intertwined with vulnerability. Of a man who risked everything, suffered greatly, and endured. And through every collapse and triumph, one truth remains. He never stopped moving. He never stopped searching. He never stopped performing. Because for Nicolas Cage, to act is to survive. To survive is to live. And to live is to dare.